There's a version of you that existed before life got complicated, before the disappointments, the betrayals, the wrong turns, and the moments you would give anything to take back. That version of you walked into the world wide-eyed, believing that hard work always pays off, that good people always win, that if you just love someone enough they would stay, and that time was something you had in endless supply. And then life happened. Not all at once, but in quiet, relentless waves that eroded everything you thought was certain. Until one day you sat in a room, perhaps alone, perhaps surrounded by people, and realized that almost everything you believed about how the world works was either incomplete or entirely wrong. That is the moment this story begins. Not with a dramatic event, but with a reckoning. A slow, sometimes painful awakening that most people only arrive at after years of living, stumbling, and picking themselves back up from the floor. If you have ever felt that gap between who you thought you would be and who you actually became, keep watching, because what follows might be the most honest conversation you have ever had about the life you're actually living. The first brutal truth is one that almost nobody talks about out loud, and it is this: most of the pain you will experience in your lifetime will not come from strangers. It will come from the people closest to you. The ones who sat across from you at dinner tables, who knew your secrets, who held your hand during difficult seasons, who called themselves your family or your best friend. Research from the field of social psychology consistently shows that emotional harm inflicted by trusted individuals leaves significantly deeper wounds than harm from acquaintances or strangers, simply because the level of trust that was present made the person vulnerable in ways they would never have been otherwise. Nobody warns you about this when you are young. You are taught to be careful around strangers, but nobody tells you to protect your peace inside the spaces where you feel the most safe. And so, when the betrayal comes, and for most people it does come, it does not just hurt. It reshapes you. It makes you question your own judgment. It makes you wonder whether you ever really knew the people you thought you knew. The lesson is not to stop trusting people. The lesson is to give trust slowly, to watch behavior more carefully than words, and to understand that not everyone who smiles at you has your best interest at heart. The second truth arrived from many people in the form of a career that consumed everything and delivered very little of what they actually wanted. There's an entire generation of people who spent their 20s and 30s pouring themselves into jobs they tolerated at best and quietly resented at worst, convinced that the sacrifice would eventually pay off, that the promotion would come, that the long hours would be remembered, that loyalty would be rewarded. And then one day the company restructured, or the position was eliminated, or the manager who promised things was replaced by someone who had no idea who they were. Studies on employee engagement and workplace satisfaction, including large-scale surveys conducted by global research organizations, have found that the majority of people are not engaged with their work, meaning they show up, they perform, but they feel no real connection to what they are doing or why. This is not a small statistic. This is a quiet epidemic of people who traded the hours of their one and only life for a version of security that turned out to be far more fragile than advertised. The brutal truth is that a title on a business card will not hold your hand when things fall apart. A corner office will not sit with you at 3 a.m. when the weight of everything becomes too heavy. Meaning matters more than prestige, and the sooner you learn that, the more of your life you get to actually live. The third truth is about time, and it is the one most people understand intellectually, but almost nobody takes seriously until it's too late. When you are young, time feels like the one thing you have in abundance. You postpone the difficult conversations, the health appointments, the creative dreams, the calls to aging parents, the trips you always said you would take. You tell yourself there will be a better moment, a more convenient season, a time when things calm down enough to do the things that actually matter. And then something happens, a loss, an illness, a birthday that arrives with a new kind of weight, and you're suddenly aware in a way you have never been before that time is not a renewable resource. Psychologists who study end-of-life reflections have found that the most common regret among people looking back on their lives is not that they worked too little or accumulated too little, but that they did not spend their time on the things and the people that genuinely mattered to them. They regret the arguments they let fester, the kind words they swallowed, the experiences they deferred until deferring was no longer an option. Time stolen from important things is never returned, and the realization of that truth is one of the most humbling moments a person can face. The fourth truth has to do with the dangerous illusion of perfection and how the pursuit of it quietly dismantles so many lives. There's a belief that runs very deep in people who are driven, ambitious, or simply raised in environments where being good enough was never quite enough. The belief that if you can just get everything right, if you could just eliminate all the rough edges and correct all the flaws and present a version of yourself that is polished and unassailable, then you will finally feel safe, loved, and worthy. But perfectionism is not a high standard. It is a form of fear wearing the costume of discipline. Research in clinical psychology has consistently linked perfectionist tendencies with higher rates of anxiety, depression, and chronic dissatisfaction, because the perfectionist is always measuring themselves against a standard that keeps moving the moment they get close to it. You finish the project and immediately see 10 things you should have done differently. You reach the goal and feel nothing, because already your mind has shifted to all the ways you could have done better. The brutal truth is that done is almost always better than perfect, that people connect with your humanity far more than they connect with your flawlessness, and that the years you spent hiding behind a polished exterior are years you could have spent being genuinely known by the people who would have loved you anyway. The fifth truth is one of the loneliest to sit with, and it is this: you cannot love someone into becoming the person they need to be. This is a lesson that tends to arrive wrapped in a relationship that should have ended long before it did. You saw potential in someone. You saw who they could be beneath all the chaos or the pain or the self-destruction, and you decided that your love, your patience, your investment, your presence would be the thing that finally unlocked that potential. And so you stayed. You stayed through the broken promises and the cycles that never ended and the version of them that kept showing up instead of the version you believed in. Love is powerful, extraordinary even, but cannot do the work that another person refuses to do for themselves. Growth is not something that can be transferred. It is not something one person can want on behalf of another. Every therapist, every counselor, every honest friend who has watched someone pour themselves into a person who is not ready to receive that love has said the same thing. You can offer a hand, but you cannot carry someone who will not walk. The moment you understand this, and truly understand it not just in theory, but in the marrow of your decisions, is the moment you stop confusing sacrifice with love. The sixth truth has to do with money, and specifically with the story most of us were told about it that turn out to be incomplete in ways that cost real years of real life. The popular version of the money story goes like this: work hard, save responsibly, spend wisely, and eventually financial security arrives. And there is truth in that. Discipline with money genuinely matters. But what the story leaves out is the psychological relationship most people have with money, a relationship shaped by fear, by scarcity thinking, by the belief that money is either something you chase desperately or something vaguely shameful to care about too openly. Financial literacy research published by institutions studying household economics has shown that a significant percentage of people across income levels experience what researchers describe as financial anxiety, a persistent low-grade stress about money that affects sleep, relationships, and decision-making, even among people who are objectively not in financial crisis. The brutal truth is that nobody teaches most people how to think about money with clarity and without panic. They teach you to earn it and spend it, but not how to make it work, how to protect it, or how to detach your sense of self-worth from your bank balance. What you were never told is that financial peace is less about the amount you have and more about the relationship you develop with what you earn. The seventh truth may be the most quietly destructive of all: the habit of waiting for external permission to pursue the life you actually want. This shows up in so many different forms that most people never recognize it as a single pattern. It looks like waiting until you lose the weight before you start dating. It looks like waiting until you have enough experience before you apply for the opportunity. It looks like waiting until the kids are older, or the mortgage is paid, or the right moment arrives, or someone important tells you that you're ready. The waiting is not laziness. It is fear operating in disguise. It is the part of you that was told at some point and by someone whose opinion mattered too much that you were not quite enough. And rather than challenge that belief, you build a life around it, structuring your choices around the assumption that the permission you needed would eventually come from somewhere outside yourself. Studies examining the psychology of self-efficacy, the belief in one's own capacity to accomplish goals, consistently show that people who operate from an internal sense of authority over their own choices demonstrate higher levels of satisfaction, resilience, and long-term success than those who perpetually look outward for validation before acting. The permission you've been waiting for is not coming from someone else. It has to come from you. The eighth truth is about the people you surround yourself with and how profoundly, almost invisibly, they shape the trajectory of your life. There is a well-known observation in personal development circles that you tend to become the average of the people you spend the most time with. And while that idea can sound oversimplified, the research behind social contagion and behavioral influence is genuinely compelling. Studies in social science have found that everything from ambition levels to emotional habits to physical health patterns are measurably influenced by one's immediate social environment. The people who sit closest to you normalize certain behaviors, certain conversations, certain ways of seeing what is possible and what is not. If the people around you have quietly given up on growth, if they're comfortable with stagnation, if they interpret your ambitions as threats or as naivety, the gravitational pull of that environment will work on you in ways you may not even notice until you look back and realize how small your life became to fit into the spaces they were comfortable with. This is not about abandoning people who are struggling. It is about being honest with yourself about whether the relationships in your life are built on genuine mutual growth or on a shared commitment to staying exactly where you are. The ninth truth is one that tends to arrive with a health scare or with watching someone else face one, and it is simpler and harder than most people want to accept. Your body is the only home you will ever live in, and neglecting it is the most expensive thing you will ever do. Not expensive in terms of medical bills alone, though those are real. Expensive in terms of the energy you will not have, the experiences you will not be present for, the sharpness of mind that dull habits slowly erode, the years of vitality quietly mortgaged to convenience and avoidance. There is enormous amounts of research supporting the connection between consistent physical care, including sleep, movement, nutrition, and stress management, and virtually every metric of life quality, from mood regulation to cognitive function to the depth of connection felt in relationships. Yet most people treat the body like a machine they only think about when it breaks down. The brutal truth is that the choices you make about your body in the years when you feel invincible are writing a story that your future self will have to live inside. That future self is not abstract. They are you, arriving faster than you think, shaped by decisions you are still making right now. The 10th truth is about forgiveness, and specifically about the version of forgiveness that most people misunderstand. Forgiveness is not a kindness extended to the person who wronged you. It is not a statement that what they did was acceptable. It is not reconciliation, and it is not forgetting. Forgiveness is a decision to stop allowing a past event to have ongoing authority over your present life. It is the recognition that carrying resentment is less like holding someone else accountable and more like drinking something harmful and waiting for the other person to suffer. Research in clinical psychology, including work published through studies on trauma recovery and emotional processing, shows that people who practice genuine forgiveness, not suppression, but actual release of resentment, demonstrate measurably lower levels of chronic stress, anxiety, and depression over time. The thing that makes forgiveness brutally hard is that it requires you to stop organizing your identity around the injury. Some people have held onto a wound for so long that the wound has become part of how they explain themselves, part of their origin story, part of their armor. Releasing it can feel like losing something, even when what you are losing is something that was hurting you. The 11th truth is about comparison and how it operates as one of the most effective thieves of genuine contentment. The comparison trap is not new, but the digital world has given it a scope and intensity that would have been unimaginable to previous generations. At almost any moment, a person can pick up a device and scroll through a curated gallery of other people's highlight reels, filtered and framed and present in the most favorable light possible, and then hold their own messy, ordinary, behind-the-scenes life up against that gallery and find themselves profoundly lacking. Mental health researchers who have studied the relationship between social media consumption and self-perception have found consistent correlations between high levels of passive social media use and increased feelings of inadequacy, envy, and dissatisfaction with one's own life circumstances. The brutal truth is that comparison is almost always unfair to you because you are comparing your interior experience of your own life, with all of its doubt and struggle and uncertainty, against the exterior presentation of someone else's life, which has been deliberately stripped of all the same doubt, struggle, and uncertainty. Everyone is fighting battles that do not appear in their photographs. Everyone has chapters they have not published. The moment you stop measuring your worth against someone else's highlight reel is the moment your own life becomes visible to you in a way it could not be before. The 12th and final truth is the one that underlies all the others, and in many ways, it is the most important thing in this entire conversation. It is this: the life you most want is not waiting for the circumstances to become perfect. It is not waiting for the fear to disappear. It is not waiting for the risk to become comfortable, or the path to become clear, or the people around you to give you permission or the moment to feel exactly right. The life you want is built in the ordinary moments that most people keep waiting to get through so they can finally start living. It is built in the small decisions made daily that either move you closer to the person you want to become or keep you circling in familiar patterns. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, whose work on finding meaning remains one of the most powerful pieces of human testimony ever written, observed that the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. That freedom, that foundational, inalienable freedom to decide how to respond to what life hands you, is the most important asset you possess. Nobody can take it from you. Circumstances cannot remove it. The question is simply whether you will use it, and whether you will use it before life gives you fewer opportunities to do so. These 12 truths are not comfortable. They were not comfortable to live through, and they're not entirely comfortable to articulate because there is something in all of us that resists the harder wisdom. We want reassurance. We want to be told that things will work out without requiring us to fundamentally change how we see ourselves or how we move through the world. But the most loving thing that can be offered is not reassurance. It is honesty. It is the kind of honest reckoning that can only come from someone who has been in the dark long enough to know what the light looks like when it finally arrives. Every single truth in this conversation was paid for with real experience, real loss, real years of living in patterns that were not serving the life being lived inside them. And every single one of them contains within a doorway. Not to a perfect life, because perfect lives do not exist, but to a more honest, more intentional, more genuinely alive version of the one you are already living. The things that reshape a person's life are rarely the dramatic events. They are rarely the big revelations or the moments of crisis, though those have their role. More often, the turning points are quiet. They are the moments someone finally decides to believe what they see rather than what they hope for. The moment someone acknowledges that the path they are on is not leading anywhere they actually want to go. The moment someone stops asking for permission and starts building the thing they have been talking themselves out of for years. Those quiet moments are where lives change. And they are available to everyone, at any age, in any circumstance, regardless of what has come before. The past has already happened. Its lessons are fixed. But what you do with those lessons is still entirely up to you. And that is not a small thing. That is everything. If there is one thing worth carrying forward from everything shared here, it is this: wisdom is not the exclusive property of the old. It does not require decades of experience to access. What it requires is the willingness to be honest with yourself, to sit with what you find, and to let it change you. Most people are not changed by information. They are changed by moments when information connects to something they have been quietly living with and have not yet had words for. If any part of this conversation was one of those moments for you, the only thing left to do is decide what you're going to do next. Not someday. Not when the time is right. Now, in the ordinary, unremarkable, enormously valuable present moment that is the only place where any real change has ever actually begun.